I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a nice tall clock case. It most certainly is from the first half of the 19th century. The owner of the clock knew it was from Scotland. The clockworks aren't here. They've gone to the clockmaker for cleaning. The face of the clock has a name on it, which is indistinguishable. But they discovered on the back of the face of the clock the names Bell and Udell, which were clockmakers in Edinburgh, Scotland, from 1832 to 1849. So, although the style of this clock is certainly what we would call a federal style earlier, maybe these side windows, which have a little Gothic thing going on, are more indicative of its age. It's not in bad shape. It's certainly been refinished in the past. It's got a few things wrong with it. Loose veneer up here on top, a little chip out of this frame of the door, but most importantly, as you can see, the whole base is coming apart. It's coming unglued, and there's a lot of veneer missing. This is basically mahogany, but this veneer along the edge is rosewood, and a lot of it's missing. I'll start by removing the door. Now I'm going to remove these brass mounts that hold the pillars. I've got to glue this molding back together, and also I think we're going to polish up the brass. I got a few things I've got to glue on this bonnet: molding, this inner frame. But I think I'll start with these little veneered panels here. All right, I've cut out some weird shaped blocks, put plastic tape on this side. These will fit right in here, so I can glue these panels down. So now I'm going to use the heat gun and my palette knives, see if I can get these fields of veneer to lift up. Alright, now I'm going to work on the door. So the door's got some veneer problems. I'll glue those down, but the worst part is that the door is cracked straight across here. And I'm going to glue that back together. I hope the glue can hold. I'm worried about the glass though. I don't want to take this glass out. I can see that it's moving without hitting the glass. I think I'm going to remove some putty along here. I want to make sure there's plenty of room for that glass to move if I clamp this downward. Okay, I've got all this putty out of here now. Now with the putty and the glass gone, I have the extra benefit of being able to open this up a little better and cleaning the old glue out. Okay, we'll see if that holds. Okay, I'm always anxious to see how these glue-ups have worked out. Oh, it looks good. Yeah, it's down. I've discovered the center inlay is a little bit loose too. Even though I've got a little more work to do on the bonnet here, I want to get started on the case. There's repairs to do on the door, so I think I'll take it off. Now the main thing that's wrong with this cabinet and why it came in here was because of this brake. The whole side is loose. It doesn't want to pull back to where it belongs. I'm hitting the bottom here. I think it's probably because the panel, the substrate panel onto which this veneer is glued, has shrunk. So I've got to figure out exactly what I'm going to do about that. I'm thinking to try to fill this gap is fruitless, a little foolish. This whole side is already loose. These three panels that make up the base, they're just nailed along here and nailed into the back. I think I'm going to remove them. I'm going to start with removing the glue blocks from the bottom, which are mostly loose anyway, and then seeing if I can remove these panels, cut the length of the bottom so that this can then come back together where it was. Alright, all the other glue blocks are already loose. Now figure out how this is still attached. It's barely attached. See if I can coax it to come loose. As near as I can tell, I think there's a block of wood in there that runs this way that this board is glued to, and everything seems loose. The way it's pivoting, I think there's probably a nail there holding it in. I need to try to get that nail out. So to get that nail out, I think I'll start by removing these nails that attach the back so I can pry this back a little bit, see if I can get that nail to start. These are not original nails. You can see that they're replacement nails, which makes them a little easier to get out. And you can see those nails down in there. Still not enough for me to grab it. Now these two nails are very much original nails. So I will tape these nails here, and I'm going to try to get them right back where they belong before I'm done. As near as I can tell, there's just some glue blocks up in there that are holding it. I'm going to see if I can loosen those glue blocks and get this panel off. Alright. Yeah, it was just glued all along here with some of this funky glue I keep finding everywhere. So now you can see that I can just loosen all these other glue blocks. There's like 6 glue blocks that are holding in this panel and the other side panel, and I want to keep those together. You know, I'm having too much trouble working down in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and take this back off so I can get to these glue blocks. Okay, now I can access these glue blocks, get these panels off, and it's going to allow me, I realized, better able, I've got to cut back these dimensions of the bottom and here in order to pull this front together. Now I don't see any nails. I don't think I see any nails on this side, but we'll find out. I'll start trying to pry this off. Alright, good. I've got this whole bottom section off. This corner stayed together, which is good. And so now I can repair the bottom. And then I've got to shorten the length of the bottom. And I have to then trim these pieces just a little bit. I've got to figure out how I'm going to take any wood off of here, and how much to take off. Now I'm not sure how this bottom is attached. There may be some glue in there, but I don't see any evidence of nails going into that bottom. I'm just going to go back to these putty knives and see if I can work them in there. Okay, so now these pieces can come back together. This is where the big crack was. So I can glue this back together, but I'm not going to glue it up independent of the clock. And of course, if I tried to put this back together on the clock, the crack would open up again. I need to reduce the size of the bottom. The bottom is too long. And cut back the blocks on the upper case so that I can bring this back together like that. So now what I want to do is clamp this together, dry of course, so that I can determine what this inside dimension is. Okay, so I've got this together pretty much exactly where it's supposed to be. Alright, now I need to carefully measure this inside dimension. Now I want to measure, this is where the sides were attached against that board. Wow, 17 1/4. Okay, now I want to measure the bottom board. See what that was. Yeah, makes sense. It's 17 1/4, exactly the same. But wow. So what all this means is that to get this assembly back on here with no crack, I've got to cut the bottom board, cut the length of it by 5/16 of an inch, and I've got to cut 5/32 of an inch off of each side of this frame right here. And note I'm going to cut a little bit on the outside of my line. And plane it down to the line. Okay, so now I've got to cut the bottom to length, 16 7/8. I'm cutting about 3/8 off of this. I'm going to put the front of it, the part that goes against the front of the clock, against the fence. And I'm going to take about 3/16 off each side so that I know it's square. Now I'm going to clamp it together dry. See what it looks like. Alright, I think I'm ready to glue this up, but I think I want to remove this rosewood banding. It's a little bit in the way, and it's loose anyway, so I'm figuring out how I'm going to clamp this up. And I'm thinking that what I might do is I might do the bottom first, kind of separately, and sort of get this box together somewhat, then put it on and glue the top section of it. Okay, I've got this rosewood banding off that was kind of in the way. I'm going to glue this together, the whole clock together in stages. I'm going to do this bottom section first because this is a very difficult glue up. It's tough because there's no real woodworking joints. These are just boards glued and nailed together. I'm going to glue it together. After the glue sets, I'm going to put in some nails to help reinforce it. There's nothing I can do about expansion and contraction the way it's built, but I hope that it's done all the shrinking that it's going to do and hopefully won't be a problem. Okay, I think that's good. I'm going to leave this in clamps overnight, and tomorrow I'll glue this section to the upper part of the clock. Okay, this is dried overnight. I'm going to take these clamps off and then nail along here through the sides into the bottom board here, which was the way it was done originally. I'm going to mark out with tape where this bottom board is. Now I'm going to use some box nail brads made by this company, which has been making nails for 200 years. Okay, so now I need to glue the bottom section here, the base, to the midsection of the clock. Just want to make sure that the base is up where it's supposed to be, and I believe that it is. Okay,
A little more.
Okay, I feel pretty confident that everything where it's supposed to be. Okay, let's see what we got. That looks good. It's staying together. Now, I want to nail this just like I did for the lower borderland base, and then install all the glue blocks from behind. Okay, so now, just like if you remember, I nailed through these boards to connect it to the bottom. I'm going to put nails along here, so we're not just relying on glue to hold it to these rails. And I mean, it was nailed originally. These nails in the front were under this rosewood inlay, and the sides went through. You can see there where they were. All right, the next step is to start gluing down the veneer banding that I have. I've got quite a few pieces here, and I've got to figure out where they go. And once I've got those glued down, then start, a lot of this was missing, and so I'll get new veneer and start putting it down. Okay, this piece, I think I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to tape it down first, open it up, put the glue in. That way I think the tape will work better. I want to sand some of these pieces of veneer that came off of here so I can see exactly what the color and grain is like. The piece of veneer I sanded it turned really, really dark. The veneer on the front of this cabinet's kind of bleached out. So I've got to figure out what I'm going to use. This is my rosewood veneer, and I've got, you know, different types. I'm not real familiar. I think this is like Honduras. This is the Brazilian rosewood, probably the darkest. But I have these old strips that I saved that came off an old cabinet of rosewood veneer, and that's what I think I'm going to use. What I did is I glued down 3 types of veneer on this piece of scrap wood. I have a piece of veneer from the clock itself, a piece of veneer I have from an antique cabinet that looks good, and then this is the new veneer I have. And so I've sanded these 3 samples all the way up to 220, and now I'm going to give them a coat of shellac. I may have to give them eventually like 2 coats to really see what they look like. So I'm really liking my samples here. It's amazing how dark the original banding is off the clock. I think I'm going to go with my antique veneer. My new veneer isn't bad, but it's just darker than that. It's really kind of hard to tell. They're all pretty close. The antique veneer is probably lighter, and so I'm going to go with that. I realized I made these little squares. I better mark which way the grain is going. Okay, I've got 4 pieces here. I don't want to try to glue down too many at one time. Alright, I'm looking forward to seeing how this comes out. Okay, let's see what it looks like. Alright, I've got, I mean, it's down nice and flat, but I do have spaces which I'll have to fill. So now I'm just going to keep going, keep gluing my pieces down on this side and that side. This old veneer is so brittle, it's chipping with the chisel. I think I'll try cutting it, or at least scoring it from above with the utility knife. Yeah, this is good. After taking off as much as I can with the utility knife, now the chisel can take it that last little bit. Before I start sanding, I've got a few gaps in some of my pieces, and I'm just going to fill them with a little wood putty first. Okay, I think I've got this sanded out fairly well with 100. I still need to sand with 150 and 220. But before I do that, I've been putting off some other things I have to do. I've got to flip this over, put the glue blocks in, and install the back. And I'm going to do that before I continue sanding. So I've got a piece of wood missing here. I've got some long corner blocks to put in these corners, corner blocks along the bottom here, and then on the very bottom corner blocks. And this is where I think I'll use the corner blocks that survive taking this apart. Alright, I've sanded this really well, all the way up to 220, and now I'm going to put a coat of shellac on it. I've sanded the sides also with 220. I'm going to give them a coat also. Okay, so I'll let this dry overnight, and then tomorrow I'll do my touch-ups and then put on another coat. Okay, this coat is dried overnight, and so now I've got to do all my little touch-ups here. And I'm going to use a dye stain. Okay, now I'm ready for my second coat of shellac. Okay, so now that second coat is dried overnight, I'm going to sand with 320 and put on a third coat. And this third coat, I think I'll use a full strength shellac right out of the can.
So I think this is ready to sand and put the final coat on. But before I do that, in this upper case here, there was a section here that's cracked. It was misaligned. I glued a thin piece of mahogany behind it on the backside to stabilize it. And now I want to fill that crack with wax. Now I'm going to sand the base with 500 and I'll put the final coat on it. You know, I haven't talked about this in the past, but this clock had clearly been refinished in the past. And the finish is a satin finish. It looks to me like probably a sprayed on lacquer. I'm not going to do that to the base, but the shellac I've been putting on is very shiny. So for a final coat, I'm going to use satin tung oil, and hopefully that'll bring it in closer to the sheen of the rest of the clock. Okay, I've let this dry for a couple days now. Everything looks good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use paste wax. I'm going to use some steel wool and I'm going to wax this whole case. My sheen on this base is maybe a little duller than this sheen. I'm hoping that the wax kind of brings it all together. But if my work's a little bit duller, that would be fine actually. So I've gone over this whole panel with just, you know, moderate pressure, trying to go as thoroughly and as evenly as I can with the steel wool. Then I'm going to take a rag and I want to end up with a really light, even coat. You don't want to leave too much wax on the surface. You actually want to leave, you know, as little as possible. So I want to make sure I clean off excess. Now I'll do the same thing to the sides, and then I'll move on to this midsection of the case and just do each surface the same way. So here you go, this nice tall case clock. If you remember, the main problem with this was that this front panel had cracked and it had shrunk up, and there was like a 3/16 inch crack along this area here. Lots of the rosewood banding was missing. I had to take this apart, resize the structure underneath to which it's attached, glue everything back together, replace all the rosewood that was missing. Luckily I had some nice antique rosewood veneer. And of course when I sanded this panel, the rosewood reverted back to its original color. The other rosewood on the piece is all faded out to be very similar color to the mahogany, but I decided that this rosewood's just going to have to fade out on its own over time, if that's what happens. I did a lot of other minor repairs to the case, and of course waxed it up, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good.